presentation is entirely designed to talk about my personal experience, how I felt it's happened, how I've overcome some of the issues, and try and give a few pointers for those who are building dashboards, particularly the new electronic dashboard environment, what to look for. So I've been done dashboards, as it says here, projects, programs, enterprises, stakeholders. Really, it's around programs and enterprises that I've focused in the last, well, many years. So let's go on about reporting and the way what a dashboard is there to do. Reporting absolutely depends on trust. When you're using a program reporting or portfolio reporting, it's very similar in the sense of how it's doing. You are basically rolling out data from the project level to the program to the enterprise. And what I have seen time and time again is when the trust at the enterprise, sometimes at the program, starts to fail. The minute it starts to fail, so my many years in London Underground, they started to lose faith in the reporting. This particularly happened during the PPP and the Metronet and days, for those of you who know London Underground. They immediately start man-marking at lower and lower levels in the business. So you get almost get a project manager in the client organization mimicking the project manager in the delivery organization. And it all comes through, it comes about because of this lack of trust in the reporting information that they are seeing. Now, I've put to the bottom here, supplier information need not roll up. I always believe there has to be a break between your supplier and the project information that the business is looking at. That said, more and more, thanks to the electronic and common environments like clouds and so on, I am seeing that supplier project performance blurring. As long as it's very clear what each person is looking at and why they're looking at it, it's not a problem. But there needs to be some strict understanding of what the supplier is doing and how much he is on the side of the business, if you like, the receiver of the project. Program control is my thing, and I recently had to give a one-slide presentation to our graduates on exactly what is program control. It was a bit of a challenge, but I came up with this description, and this is really what dashboarding is all about. It's taking all of that raw material, that raw data on the left-hand side, your dates, the milestones, assurance information, cost change, forecast information, resources, what you've achieved, pouring it into some kind of filter, a system that can bring alignment to it and make it understanding. So I'm showing here, and it comes out the other end as champagne. It's the ultimate objective is that the program manager can read one page of dashboard information and he knows exactly what's going on his entire program. That's a dream, but that's what you're trying to achieve. At the end of the day, you're really trying to get people to focus on key information and not plow through acres of information. So that, as a program control, this is what we do. We take lots of data and clean it up, make it digestible. Now, one of the most, you'd have thought that the timing of data and the timing of reporting would be easy to describe, but this seems to be the single failure point on so many of the reporting structures I've worked on. Putting a report in and program control is all about putting discipline into a program or into an environment, into an enterprise. And time again, I find enterprises fairly lax on the timing cycle. So some of the major projects that I know are running in the business today don't have, unbelievably, a single reporting cycle. You've got the more mature environments, so London Underground and Network Rail have been going forever, and they are fixed and nailed on 4-week cycles. But some of the major programs that are running in the UK at the moment, they actually have multiple timetables. When you have a multiple timetable, you're not quite sure when to take what data from a particular data set. It destroys the trust that I talked about earlier. So one of the very first things I focus on is getting consistent data dates. When are you going to take the data that you're going to base all your reporting upon? Sounds simple and sounds obvious, but like I said, it's probably one of the most common failures of consistent reporting in organizations. So what is a dashboard? Well, classically they were always paper-based, and let's be fair, most of the dashboards out there today still are paper-based. And I brought this one up. This was one I did in South Africa. I went to work, sorry, not in South Africa, in Ghana. I went and worked on a gold mine in the outback of Ghana for about 6 months, and I had to just go back to basics. And since coming back to the UK and back into the, if you like, sophisticated environment of program delivery, I've realized that the same basic dashboard still holds up. You still need to know, to present to whoever's reading it, what is the job about, where are you in the project, a little statement by the project manager, the most probably crucial element, where you are with the money, who is actually in charge of this project. When you've got 600 or 700 projects running, as we did in London Underground, you have to be able to identify individual projects. I appreciate this is a project, not a program at this stage, but this is where the fundamental data for your program management information comes from. And if you keep it simple at this level, you encourage people to report effectively and consistently, and then it's safe to roll this data up through the organization. The next slide is unreadable, but then it would be. This is an example of when dashboards go wrong. This dashboard was when I went to South Africa, working for the gold mine there. This was an A3 sheet with the print in 10 point. In fact, most of it was in 8 point. So it was A, unreadable. It was issued to every single project working in the programs. Nobody knew how to fill it in, and in fact it was only because I actually read it in detail I realized that somebody had created this in Excel and it didn't even add up. But because it was so complicated, nobody had noticed that it was an error. So this is where you start to lose complete faith in the data that's being produced. In fact, this data was all rolled up into the corporate analysis, through a program into the corporate analysis, and I discovered I was also responsible for delivering that corporate analysis. I was given the existing report. I went out into the business and realized that all I could see was this report sitting in the corner gathering dust. So my first action was to miss the delivery date of the next report. Not a single person complained. Obviously, nobody in the business had ever read this report. So that was a great illustration that I was free to build something much more effective, and we did, and changed the way the business reported. I have to say it was tremendously successful. So I've shown a classic dashboard, but there is no universal dashboard. People have asked me many times, can you give me a good dashboard that I could use? What I've done nowadays is I actually have a folder with lots of dashboards copied out, and so that they promote a conversation. Every project is different, much as many people would say they're not. They are different. The client has a different priority. They may have a higher safety aspect. Cash flow may be critical if you're working in a public sector with annualized funding, or in the private sector with a limited budget. Cash flow's king. Deliverables. One thing that's probably common, everybody wants to know what's going to happen when. Everybody wants milestones because they are great little sound bites that can be used. Risk exposure. One of my pet hates, but everybody wants the top 5 risks on a dashboard. On a paper dashboard, that is so insensitive. They never change. For 6 months at a time, the risks on that top 5 will always be the same. Because they're always the same, nobody actually pays any attention to it. People only spot things that are different. And ultimately, down the bottom there, commentary. It's the really critical part. It's when the project manager describes exactly what it is that they're doing, that's when you get the essence of what's important in the business. However, this is an early warning. I've been involved in quite a few electronic dashboards and systems that get built. So you glue your Primavera to your cost management system, to your change management workflow, to your risk management system. Those people who are really good, particularly at using Excel, love to make everything integrate. They love to join it together. There's this assumption that you can almost control your projects or programs remotely. It just needs a little dial to adjust the amount of float or whatever on the project, and you're in charge. This is a CH2M slide that they've used on all of our reporting to show people about this stuff, and it just illustrates it doesn't work. You need people in the system, but you cannot control a project purely by looking at data. You have to talk to the delivery people. The humans and their communications are the core to that. Conversations run projects, not the data and the graph that you produce. So, as I say from that, it is all about the data. It needs to be produced. Now this particular graph, this is actually, I was trying to illustrate one of our projects that we're running at the moment, the Thames Tideway. Now Thames Tideway is a big project to put a massive sewer pipe. It's from Hammersmith here all the way down to Greenwich, 7-metre diameter tunnel which will deal with all of the sewage outflow that overflows from the old Bazalgette tunnels. Marvellous project, relatively straightforward. If you think building a 7-metre tunnel 50 metres underneath the Thames is straightforward. The great thing about this project is right from the early days, and that's nearly 4 years ago, they realized that defining the scope and controlling the scope was the essence of the project. So they created a book of scope. It isn't actually a book, it's actually a database. And from the very early days through to today, when they're just about to start real work, start digging some holes, that scope book is strictly controlled. There's actually a person dedicated almost all of the time to dealing with change and bringing it into the scope, making sure everybody is involved in that process of change. So there's never a chance that they're building something that isn't actually in the scope. Probably almost unique as far as I can see as projects. They bring all of that through the work breakdown structure. They combine, they've got the estimates, the risk registers. They actually end up generating a thing called the program breakdown structure. Now this one is not very readable, but I just wanted to bring it in. It's interesting because they've understood that there's the direct scope, which is the scope in that blue book as I just shown. It's very strict. It's exactly what the business has got to build. But then there is the indirect scope, which is still consuming budget. So you've got the management overheads, the work they've got to do post-construction, the fact that they've got to deal with the government and support goes into the project. They've got to buy land. They're not really part of the true scope, but they are associated with it. And this program breakdown structure includes all of this and allows it to be displayed and reported against both separately and together. So you get an overall picture. The program director of Thames Tideway knows exactly what is going on and where it's going on. Which brings me on to this point about data. And if you're going to build a dashboard, to make it effectively, you're looking for trends. To get trends, you need historic data so you can look forward to see where it's going. So that is why it is so important to look at program coding really early on. Another program I'm working with is the Thames Tideway, which is the management of all assets on the tidal aspects of the Thames. On the day that was launched, first thing we did was sit down with the client, with our suppliers and ourselves, and went through and developed a description of all the data we would need to run this program. You'll never get it 100% right, but we appear 18 months in to have got it 95% right. What it means is right from the early days we had GIS information, we had asset condition information, all the data we needed to associate with the delivery program, and we haven't had to start again. Many programs I see go through, if you like, stage gates, so they go from outline design to design, to procurement to construction, and each time they go through one of those gates, somebody comes up with a better cost breakdown structure or a better organizational structure, and they rebuild the entire data set. The thing with this is there's no need to do that. They are databases. You just add more information as you grow, and you allow yourself to use that data to filter. Project and program control is about the management of data. It's all it is. Databases, Primavera, Prism, all of your risk management tools, they're databases. That's all they are. Make sure you remember that and add to your databases, and don't try to corrupt the coding system. Now, there is one further aspect to data, which again I've seen missed quite a few times. It's the element of time. Now, I've put this up. This is called a data cube. Now, I've got to say it's something I only came across probably 2 years ago, but I just feel it really explains how you manage to put program data together and how it's useful to you. So you've got a layer, if you like, where you can see on that slide, I've got January. If you take all of the elements of January, your scores on safety, your scores on risks, your budget, your actual costs to date, your forecast cost for that date, that's great. You know where you are. Or sorry, you know what you've spent. You don't necessarily know where you are. Unless you have a trend of where you are, and if you like project it forward where you're going, you don't really have any performance data that you can base your reporting on. You've no way of judging how well you're doing. The data cube is a great way of making sure that in your mind you understand what you're trying to do. Each month or each reporting cycle, you are taking another slice of that data and gluing it onto the cube. You're removing a forecast element of the code, and you've still got, and probably putting the forecast for rephrasing the forecast going forward. If you think about it as that cube, what's happening now, and this is true of Crossrail, and I believe it's coming up on high speed too, they are creating separate databases which do not belong to any of the tools. So they don't belong to the Primaveras, the ARM or anything like that. It's just a database of data, and that is what you put your performance dashboards upon. You put them on that separate, standalone, highly protected and driven entirely by the reporting cycle. Remember, there's no such thing as real-time project reporting. Not really. It has to be a week late or a month late. It's always going to be a cycle. You can't have a project dashboard with a speedometer that's moving daily. It only moves how often you believe that is necessary to actually take a cut of this data. So how do you see this data? Well, this one is a very basic front page screen of one that we were developing, or I have developed for Team 2100 for the Environment Agency. I immediately would like to point out that this is very much in a development budget, so development phase. So when I took this clip, do not worry about any of the values. They have no relevance whatsoever. But the dashboard here is a program dashboard, and what it has is every single project, and there are over 200 live projects on this job, that each one of those is rolled up into this high-level electronic dashboard. This is just example data from an internal tool we use called PMIS, Project Management Information System. It's a CH2M's in-house tool, but I do know there's other tools out there that do this in the marketplace, but it's something that we have developed and we use it quite a bit within CH. It's worth knowing, not many people know about CH2M, but as a company we are 25,000 people. Most of those, 20,000 of those are in America, but we are quite a large organization. Matter of interest, we're also an employee-owned organization, so we tend to work together very well across our different communities, and it's from that working together that we've come up with tools like this, which is the PMIS. So here you can see there's lots of individual projects. There's the summary values of those projects. We can using the RAG principle, so you can see their cost variances or schedule variances, the program manager flips from the program level reporting and drops down to this. He can then go to the numbers. Now he's got exceptions. You've got red ones, which you would be the first ones you check and see if there's an issue. Allows you to drill down through the project system. But once you've got data structured like this, you can also do other things with it. And one of the effective ways, I believe we're using this, so again, this is back to Thames Tideway, sorry, Team 2100, is you can actually locate that data onto a GIS map. So you'll see here in the middle, there's a graphical representation of the Thames. Now there are coloured dots, and because I can't show you the detailed information, I'm afraid I've kept it at this high level. But this is again, it was a development phase, so I think there's a SPI of 0.9, a CPI of 0.56 on there. Trust me, that's not how the project really is. But here you've got these little yellow dots, and each one of those sets of colours, so you can see green, yellows and reds, is actually a program in their own right, and each of the dots is a project. So if you clicked onto the yellow, you would bring up that group of projects as a single program. You would see a screen much like this, and you could drill down trying to find out where the issues are. And we can actually put coloured flags against these little dots to show where maybe problems are. It's very useful because to a client, it immediately translates a series project information back to where exactly is this issue happening. And if you can see, so if you take the red ones, you're in a very much in the tidal remit of the Thames. If they understand that as a client, you understand some of the difficulties maybe the job is experiencing. So the next level down, I don't have the drop down for Thames Tideway, but I've got it for other projects. So this is typical. You will see here we've dropped down to a work site. It's an individual program. There's one's for a pump station. We can then just drop down and we can start seeing the same data onto the dashboard with a little pin showing where the individual project is. It's highlighting a specific project. You're getting reports, you're getting the pictures. We use pictures a lot nowadays. It's a great way of displaying information. You can choose we use earned value where we can, and this is using earned value on this program. Shows you the performance of individual projects. So you've got this data that you can just keep on flipping in different ways. If you imagine each of these is simply a tile with the data, I can change those tiles. So where it's got the CPI, SPI matrix, I can have that at project level, I can have that at program level, I can group them by, say, a whole bunch of projects where a single supplier is involved. Any possible combination you can imagine, providing I've thought about creating that as a data. For instance, on the Team 2100, we're possible to group it up by asset types. So I can bring it up by all the floodgates, by all of the flood field, all of the flow, sorry. We've got the floodgates, we've also got the walls, the flood defences. Different projects and different approaches, but you can show how well we're doing on different areas, and that's really powerful for the client to understand how well the programs are going. And then we're getting down to more detail. The last one on these dashboards, you can see here we've got the top right hand corner. This turns out to be one of the most popular areas, the percent complete, how far through the project you are. It's great to flip through portfolios of programs. So if I moved the cursor down the left-hand side of projects, you would see the percent complete changing as it went down each project. And that's great when you're looking at an overall program. It's percent complete on a program is almost meaningless. You just want to know when it's the dates. The percentage doesn't really mean something, but on an individual project, it's an indication of how well you are through that program. And you can see this is a single project showing the location within your overall layout, graphs of performance, and across the top there you can look at it by schedule, cost, and value. You can bring up some standard reports or interrogate the risks. The risks actually, although I've not put it as a presentation on here, is probably one of the most useful features I find because it's dynamic. you can drill down through the top risks. And because you can drill down, it makes you want to drill down. And because you drill down, you pay attention to the risks. Nothing like a bit of interactive electronic wizardry to get the client excited about what's going on his program. But there's a few things about reporting generically, the dashboard, that I think helps you keep informed on why we do them. I've called it the philosophical bit. Why do we do dashboard reports or reports at all? One of the things that came clear to me early on in life was that the project reports are actually the only proof that you can give to an auditor that the project was under control throughout its life or not. It's very important to be able to keep a record, to be able to keep those reports and redisplay them for the entire history of the project. If an auditor comes in and wants to prove that this project is being managed, he just has to pick up the last year's worth of reports and flip through them. If they change every month, if there's a dynamism about them, that will show up, and that really helps the auditor feel confident in the management of the job. It gives an integrated view of the project, the balanced scorecard, as I showed early on with that standard dashboard. You're bringing together the risks, the safety, the commentary, the financial performance, and probably just more important as far as program and the business is concerned, milestone reporting. Milestones are probably the single easiest way of understanding what's happened on a project. Earned value is the best for performance, but earned value gives you the sound bites of what's been achieved. And at the senior level, that's the kind of thing you need when you're talking to your client or you're talking to your public, if it's a public project, about what's actually delivered. So that balanced scorecard is a tremendously useful tool and is critical. I said at the beginning that reports are about just talking, they're conversations. A report on its own, the dashboard on its own, makes no impact on changing the way the project is performing. It is simply a record. It is a snapshot of what the data is telling you today. What you have to do is the project manager, the program manager, the client need to talk to each other and understand what the data is telling you. You have that conversation. The conversation is what changes the project, and having a dynamic dashboard that allows you to drill in and drill out of a program allows that conversation to be much more dynamic, allows the client, when you're looking at a program, to feel complete confidence in that drill down level by level by level. And remember, I was talking, it's all about trust. If you can drill down dynamically, it promotes trust. If you have paper reports and they have a paper dashboard per project and a paper dashboard per program, you can almost guarantee that because some client will do this, if he adds up all of the projects and he compares it to the data on the program, they won't add up. It may only be by a small number, but the minute they don't add up, immediately you lose trust. An integrated dashboard that is electronic, that uses the same data to roll up and down, that's never going to be a risk. It's probably almost psychological, but it promotes confidence in the program and the way you're delivering it. So it gives the program manager a bit of a confidence boost when he's speaking to his clients. And then finally is this drumbeat. Everybody runs around delivering the project, but if you don't have this monthly or 4-weekly cycle to produce reports, the program tends to lose pace. It drifts a little. So having the report, and remember I said it's got to be a agreed data date, agreed cut of data, and agreed production at a certain time of the month or days into the cycle. If you have that drumbeat, the business feels confident that's going on, everybody understands what the cycle is, it forces reflection every 4 weeks on exactly how well this program's doing, and across everybody in the business can see how well you're doing. If you don't have that drumbeat, there's no feedback loop. So it's a really good way of making sure that everybody understands what you're doing, every 4 weeks or whatever the cycle, month, everybody knows what milestone was missed or what milestone's coming up in the next month, and it keeps the feet to the fire, as they say. But there are issues, and even with electronic dashboards, there are issues. I love this concept, the watermelon culture. If you look at programs, you can easily have all green at the top, and the problem is it's all green because the pluses and minuses inside the program have balanced out. If you don't drill down to the next level, you may not see the red. Now you can put flags in which says if a project is red, put the flag at the top. I like that. It's even though all of the high-level overall performance, your spending on target, your achievement on target in terms of milestones appears to be right, but if there's one project going wrong, that could be the one that's going to push your schedule for your program over the edge, and before it gets there you want to know about it. You do not want it to push before you actually do something about it. So I love the term of watermelon culture, red on the inside, green on the outside. I had a great program director in London Underground. He came up with this phrase that you can't get redder than red. When we first put earned value into London Underground and we produced a report, I think we put something like a 10% RAG report. If you were 10% off target on your earned value SPI or CPI, your figures went red. The result was, the first time we ran that, was essentially every project went red. So we took this, because that was the measure we'd agreed. We took that to the program director and said, look, what a disaster. His immediate comment was, okay, that's no use to me. Change the measure to 50%. Huge variance allowance. The result was maybe 10 went red. He could now work on the worst one, and each month we wrapped it back so that after 6 months we were back to 10%. But it was just a great lesson on don't worry about what the measure is. The point is you need the information to know where to focus. So choose your measures, choose your trips for the RAG report carefully, and don't be afraid to change them over the months. Bring the target closer and closer. So just a few final insights. I said I've been making reports, doing dashboards for years, and if you like, this is the essence of what I've learned. Remember that you are creating a report or a dashboard for the reader, for the client, for the program manager. Just because you're an expert at Excel does not mean you can go to town and build an incredibly complex system that tells you everything about the project, providing you understand how to read this report. You need to make it readable by the people who are going to look at it, going to put their decisions based on it, and the time they've got available to read it. Next thing, they're only part of the story. They make a conversation. They are not the solution. The dashboard is not the solution. They are just a way of promoting conversation. And I've just said before, being clever means being simple, and it is really hard work to make a simple dashboard. And then the last one, which I think is probably most important, if nobody from the client or the program manager is asking you to change that report, it almost certainly is not being read. As a program or project proceeds, the program managers and the clients learn more about how to read your reports. They understand the nuances that are built into the data and the numbers, and as such they ask for more and more information. That's why you start with an incredibly simple dashboard, and frankly, as the education of the client goes up, then you can bring in more sophistication, more focus on what matters to them and what you know they should care about. So if you've got a report and nobody's asked you to change any data fields on it in the last 3 months, worth spending a bit of time checking with your clients that it's actually doing the job.
What's your view of using Excel to create sophisticated dashboards as opposed to enterprise systems?
Okay, Excel is excellent, and it's a great, there's 2 bits to this. It is a great tool to test out dashboards on because it is so flexible. If you go for an enterprise system, then it's better off using a data system using a professional reporting tool. The issue with Excel, I find, is that once you start using it as a dashboard tool, the author of the Excel dashboard gets enthused and it becomes more and more sophisticated. At some point, that person either moves onto another project or leaves the project. Now the next poor soul has got to pick up running this dashboard, and they find it's got so many links, so many macros built into it, it becomes almost not understandable as to how it's working. And usually what happens is 2 months after the author leaves, some subtle linkage in the system, maybe bringing data in from your accounting system, fails, or the accounting people have changed a field on their export, and suddenly the entire report doesn't work anymore. If you're in that scenario, Excel becomes really hard to fix. But like I said, it is a great tool, and it's cheap, and it's available, and it's on everybody's desktop. It just requires a great deal of discipline around the documentation of what's going on, and locking down the ability to change it, and making sure you're sure where the data is coming from. The only other aspect about using Excel that always worries me is it is very easy to override data, and then that single source of truth, that confidence that the clients have in exactly what you're looking at, can quickly become corrupted. So yeah, it's a mix for Excel.
Who creates the dashboard? What drives the content and definitions? And is it driven by the senior management who want to see certain things that are important to them, or should it be led by the PMO, for example?
Well, my experience is that the senior management team don't actually know what it is they want, frankly. So you start by the PMO producing the dashboard. The PMO author it, the PMO are the ones who are going to be able to get hold of the data. The data may be the limiting factor. You can only report the material you've got. So it's always going to start with the PMO, and my experience is you start with a meeting with the client saying what's important to you, then the PMO goes away and creates a dashboard, crudely knowing what's good for the client and knowing what he really is interested in. But again, I'd say at that point of the time, I don't think they always know at the early start what exactly they want. And expect your dashboard, when it comes up against the client, to evolve. Never produce a dashboard without explaining to the client how to read it, what it means, how to look for variation. It's not good enough to simply produce a dashboard and stand back. You have to ensure that your client understands the context of what he's looking at. So the answer is, I think it's a PMO leads, and you tune it as the client needs it.
So you mentioned about reporting to clients there. Client program and project reporting is different from internal reporting. How can we use a single platform to manage two reporting outputs?
Okay, that's an interesting question. It's different. So when you're reporting to clients, there can be two different reports. When, for instance, if you are if you're delivering a program on behalf of a client, but obviously the numbers that you're putting into the dashboard for your own team are what it's costing, whereas the numbers for the client would be whatever he's paying for, which may be different. You may need to have a separate dashboard for your client that has separate financial information, but I would keep all of the other information the same: the project manager's commentary, the milestone achievements, the changes that are going through the program, because it just promotes a great deal of partnership with your client. So as much as possible, you always want to keep your client, whether it's the program manager or the ultimate client, totally involved in what is going on in that program. And I just think openness always makes discussions easier.
What are you using to monitor and act on this? Just around trust.
Well, there's two bits to that. As a company, CH2M, we actually do send out surveys to our clients, and it is intended to understand how well people trust what we're providing. But really, this is a program level trust, and that comes down to the program manager and the project manager, and it's their relationship with the clients. And it's pretty obvious whether or not you get trust. Remember what I said right at the beginning: trust if failure of trust, it starts to mean man marking. It's when the client starts to put more resources into monitoring exactly what you're telling him. That's the measure of a failing system. So the more happy that the client is that he believes everything you're telling him, that's the measure of success for trust. I don't think there's a score for trust, because you've got to trust the client, by the way, as well as the client trusting you. So trust is it's a 360 degree, and one of the things there's lots of stuff on the internet about trust which I find really interesting, and I think project managers and program directors would be well advised to read up on trust and how you achieve it. And by the way, you don't get it unless you give it.
So in the era of big and accessible data, to what extent are clients asking you to provide live data accessible at any given moment rather than at planned intervals? And do you see that as a looming requirement if it's not yet the case?
Yeah, this is a big issue. It's not actually become that much of an issue for the ones I've worked on so far, but everybody has this sneaking suspicion of why can't I tell day on day what's going on in your program. I think this is going to become in the future much more of an issue when BIM becomes truly integrated with the project control. So when you have a camera, if you like, monitoring the site, and it's watching progress, and you can associate that progress electronically with how much money has been spent on site and so on, then it might become an issue. The problem is that the way things are with contract payments, your accruals, progress information, the fact it's all coming in dribs and drabs day after day, it really makes no sense to do live data. That's why this data date and the reporting cycle is so important. I'm saying it's all about the accessible data. You have to force that cycle of reporting, otherwise the system will fail, with the one exception of safety, which you can do on a daily basis. But generally speaking, it's got to be a cyclical report. The dashboard does not change between reporting periods.
For example, if you're working across different countries and continents, how do you incorporate culture and how do you use dashboards to address that cultural divide?
Yes, but it's the same way as any other approach, where you've got to imagine that the client doesn't really understand what it is he's reading when he's looking at your dashboard. I had a tremendous learning on this when I worked in Ghana. I worked on a gold mine there, and my first issue was actually identifying all of the projects that went to make up the programs we were running. There was a culture there of, well, don't worry, it'll be okay. In fact, and I had a list of projects on the wall under each program, which took up about one A0 chart, one piece of paper, and every time somebody said, oh, I'm working on something, and they wasn't on the list, I actually got them to write up on the list what it was that they were working on, and it ended up within a month I doubled the length of the list. There was all of these projects and pieces of work going on that nobody knew about, but they were contributing towards the programs. So I introduced the standard dashboard reporting, got the project people to come in and explain, and that was the first time they'd ever had to sit in front of somebody who had the data and could ask fairly pointed questions, because I understood how to read data. They hadn't been introduced to that, and although they'd not been in that process, they were isolated, if you like. On the mine, the only thing they ran it by was how much money had they spent at the end of the month. That was all they cared about. They didn't dynamically manage their projects. So I was working with South Africans in Johannesburg, some of the control staff in Australia, and the teams out in the mine itself. And by using this one common dashboard, you easily allow the communication across all of those multi-environments. It's a common language.